Good morning, everyone. We are in 2 Samuel this morning, page 316-ish in the scriptures. As always, read along in your Bible, please. Got a frog in my throat all of a sudden. And it came to be after the death of Shaul, when David had returned from striking the Amalekites, that David remained 2 days in Siklag. That's the town, the city that he went back to defend. If you're not tracking, go back and read, or go back to last week's video. We have playlists, Old Testament and New Testament here. You can find 2 Samuel, let's see, I think we did 29, 30, and 31. 1 Samuel, 29, 30, 31, talking about Siklag. And it came to be on the third day that, see, a man came out of the camp from Shaul, from Saul, with his garments torn and dust on his head. And it came to be, when he came to David, that he fell to the ground and did obeisance. And David said to him, "From where do you come?" And he said to him, "I have escaped from the camp of Israel." And David said to him, "What was the matter? Please inform me." And he said, "The people have fled from the battle, and also many of the people have fallen and are dead. And Shaul and Jonathan his son are dead too." And David said to the young man who informed him, "How do you know that Shaul and Jonathan his son are dead?" And the young man who informed him said, "By chance I was on Mount Gilboa, and saw Shaul leaning on his spear. And see, the chariots and horsemen followed hard after him. And when he looked behind him, he saw me and called to me, and I answered, 'Here I am.' And he said to me, 'Who are you?' So I answered him, 'I am an Amalekite.' And he said to me, 'Please stand over me and put me to death, for agony has seized me, but my life is still in me.' So I stood beside him and put him to death, for I knew he would not live after he had fallen. And I took the diadem, or the crown, that was on his head, and the bracelet that was on his arm. I have brought them here to my master." And David took a hold of his garments and tore them, and also the men who were with him. So tearing your garments is like a massive sign of mourning. And David and the men who are with him are tearing their garments in mourning. David had this relationship with Shaul, that even as Shaul did not approve of David, David approved of him. And David was constantly sparing him his life. And David definitely had a relationship with Jonathan, the extent of which we'll examine a little bit here. We'll get to it when we get to it. And they mourned and they wept and they fasted until evening for Shaul and for Jonathan his son and for the people of Yahweh and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. Then David asked the young man who informed him, "Where are you from?" And he answered, "I am the son of a sojourner, an Amalekite." And David said to him, "How was it that you were not afraid to stretch out your hand to destroy the anointed of Yahweh, Saul?" And David said to him, David called one of the young men and said, "Draw near and fall on him." And he struck him so that he died. And David said to him, "Your blood is on your own head, for your own mouth has witnessed against you, saying, 'I myself have put to death the anointed of Yahweh.'" Then David lamented with this lamentation over Shaul and over Jonathan and his son. And he ordered the bow, air quote, the bow, to be taught to the children of Judah. See, it is written in the book of Jasher. Written in the book of Jasher. Now, we need to pause here just a moment before we read the bow, because there's some talking points here. This is me speaking, not the Bible. We're beginning to see here, by this point in the story, that David is a very conflicted man. He is a man after Yah's own heart, but he's a very conflicted man. He does some things that are absolutely mighty and wonderful in service to Yah, and he does some things that are abhorrent, that are not in service to Yah, because he's a man. And yet when he speaks to Yah, Yah listens and speaks back. there's a point there, because we know in Proverbs that the prayers of those who abominate Yah are not heard. It's in the book of Proverbs. I would recommend that you go look that up for yourself. But Yah doesn't hear the prayers of those that abominate. That's something to remember. And this Bible doesn't contradict itself. The next is, David is now commanding the children of Judah to add things to their traditions, the way they do things. This is the tip of the iceberg. This is the beginning of doctrines and dogmas of men. We're not going to break our ankle in that rabbit hole, but it's the beginning of the doctrines and dogmas of men versus the commands of Yah, or in addition to the commands of Yah. And I lost my third point. Maybe it will come back to me, maybe it won't. More coffee is indicated, as my pastor would say. Yes, the coffee helped. Under David, we see the beginning of the split into what's called two house. There's two houses, okay? There's two camps that arise, if you'll allow me that term, in Israel. Predominantly Judah, or the Yehudim, the Jews, and everyone else. Remember that Judah is just one of 12 tribes. There's Asher and Gad and Benjamin and Ephraim and Manasseh and so forth and so on, and yada, yada, yada. Well, we're going to see in this story, David rises to power. Not everybody agrees with that. And so you begin to see the divergence of these two houses, Judah and everybody else. So, things to be aware of as we continue with David, possibly things for you to research on your own. And I guess one more point before we hop back in the Word. 1st and 2nd Samuel are very they're more matter of fact about the life and times of David than, for example, Chronicles. Chronicles whitewashes a lot of what happened with David and a lot of the accusations that are made against David. So we're getting it a little bit more raw here in Samuel. By the time we make it to Chronicles, where there's a second telling of David, things are a little bit more whitewashed. They've had some opportunity to get their PR campaign together by then. So, back to the bow. Verse 18, and David ordered the bow to be taught to the children of Judah. See, it is written in the book of Jasher, the splendor of Israel is slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Declare it not in Gath. Proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon. Let the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised exult. Mountains of Gilboa, no dew or rain be upon you, no fields of offerings. For there the shield of the mighty lay rejected, the shield of Shaul not anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back, and the sword of Shaul did not return empty. Shaul and Jonathan were beloved and pleasant in their lives, and in their death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. Daughters of Israel, weep over Shaul, who wrapped you in scarlet and finery, who decked your robes with ornaments of gold. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan was slain in your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. You have been very pleasant to me. Your love to me was wondrous, surpassing the love of women. How the mighty have fallen, and the weapons of battle perish. Oops. Kick the dang tripod. Now, throughout 1 Samuel and now to 2 Samuel, many scholars, air quote, and historians, air quote or actual, have made the argument that David was either homosexual or bisexual. And they point to the interactions between between David and Jonathan. For example, when David walks into the tent holding Goliath's head, and we'll see elsewhere that, in fact, in Chronicles, that now somebody else is trying to take the credit for killing Goliath, not David. But that always happens, doesn't it? How many people claim to be the actual shooter of Osama bin Laden? More than one, right? Enough time passes and people start to forget what they know. And people that weren't there start to believe the rumors and the lies. But when David walks into Shaul's tent holding the bloody head of Goliath, David's soul and Jonathan's soul click. So people have pointed to that. People have pointed to how Shaul berates Jonathan for choosing David over his own house, almost like one would in a relationship that exceeded platonic love. You know, and then here you have this. You have been very pleasant to me. Your love to me was wondrous, surpassing the love of women. And so people have made the argument, and perhaps accurately, I'm neither a scholar, nor a theologian, nor a historian, that David was bisexual. Perhaps, but I have one.
Dad?
Yes, sweetheart.
What do turtles eat?
What do turtles eat?
Yeah.
They eat leaves and grass and stuff and bugs. Great question. Good times.
Then, beans.
And beans? Yeah, they'll eat beans. Okay. Hey, I'm doing my video, okay? Okay, I love you. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I can't speak with authority on this subject because I'm not bisexual. But we do know that the prayer of those who abominate, the Lord does not hear. We know this from Proverbs. And yet, here throughout this word, literally, the very next few sentences we're going to read is, and David spoke to Yah, and Yah answered him. So, if we know this word to be true, and I believe that it is, we can't have a conflict in here. It simply means that there's something that we don't understand. The word cannot conflict against the word. It simply means there's something we don't understand. Well, if he was bisexual, which I can understand the arguments why he might have been, why did Yah answer his prayers? When it says in Proverbs that he doesn't do that. So I'm going to go with, for me, he wasn't, but that they were bros. They were the most hardcore bros that ever broed. David had a wife, 2 of them. Jonathan had a wife and a kid, and a 5-year-old son by the time he was killed. Which, yes, there's many gay men with wives. My point here is they, at the very least, had women in their lives. Do I believe they loved each other? Absolutely. I don't know that I believe that they were in love with each other. And all that to say, I don't know how relevant to the story it is, other than for those that identify that way, the idea that King David had been gay or bisexual has become a battle cry for a certain subset of those within the church. Again, homosexuality is an abomination. Doesn't mean that those people are an abomination. It means that that act is an abomination. And abominations from the book of Proverbs provoke the Father against us. So not only is he now being neutral towards you, you're pissing him off. Also, for those that like to cling to the idea of eating swine is also an abomination per Leviticus 11. So, I've said it before. I got this from a friend of mine who's a cop and likes to say things like a cop. And I will censor myself when I say this. When you put that bacon in your mouth, it might as well be your buddy's phallus. Because they're the same thing. Yeah. Chapter 2, 2 Samuel. And it came to be afterwards that David inquired of Yahweh, saying, do I go up to any of the cities of Judah? And Yahweh said to him, go up. And David said, where should I go up? And he said, to Hebron. So David and Yah are clearly still talking. And David went up there, as well as his two wives, Ahinoam the Yisraelitess, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal, the Carmelite. And David brought up the men who were with him, each man with his household, and they dwelt in the cities of Hebron. And the men of Judah came, and anointed David king over the house of Judah, there. They also reported to David, saying, the men of Yavesh Gilead are they who buried Saul. David then sent messengers to the men of Yavesh Gilead and said to them, you are blessed of Yahweh, for you have shown this loving commitment to your master, to Shaul, that you buried him. And now Yahweh is showing loving commitment and truth to you, and I am also going to do you good because you have done this deed. And now let your hands be strengthened and be brave, for your master Shaul is dead, and also the house of Judah has anointed me king over them. But Abner, the son of Ner, commander of the army of Shaul, took Ishbosheth, the son of Shaul, and brought him over to Machanaim. There we go. Got it. And set him up to reign over Gilead, and over the Asherites, and over Yisrael, and over Ephraim, and Benjamin, and over all of Israel. And so, here's what happens. David is crowned king over Judah. Abner, who was like the top general under Saul, grabs Saul's oldest kid, or remaining kid, and says, hey, you're king now. And he sets him up over all the rest of Israel. And Ishbosheth, son of Shaul, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. Only the house of Judah followed David. And the time that David was king in Hebron, hold on. Hey, turn that down, please. Turn it down, please. Hey, give me that. You're done with that right now. Give me. Take this. Downstairs, please. Look at me. Downstairs, please. And go see Bubba 9. And let me finish what I'm doing, okay? Be careful going down the stairs with that blanket so you don't trip. Thank you. Restful, peaceful Sabbath. Hashtag dad stuff. So, 2 house. Ishbosheth, the son of Shaul, is set up over all of Israel. David is king of Judah. And then the split happens. Ishbosheth, the son of Shaul, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and reigned 2 years. Only the house of Judah followed David. And the time that David was king over Hebron in the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 new moons. And Abner, son of Ner, and the servants of Ishbosheth, son of Shaul, went out from Menachem to Gibeon. And Joab, son of Saruiah, and the servant of David went out and met them by the pool of Gibeon, and they sat down, one on one side of the pool, and on the other side of the pool. And Abner said to Joab, "Let the young men now rise and compete before us." And Joab said, "Let them rise." And they rose and went over by number, 12 from Benjamin, followers of Ishbosheth, son of Shaul, and 12 from the servants of David. So they're facing off now. They're having a little trial by combat here. And each man took a hold of his opponent by the head and thrust his sword in the opponent's side. They fell down together. So that place is called the Field of Sharp Swords, which is in Gibeon. The trial by combat just turned into a slaughter. And the battle was fierce that day. There was no peace settled that day. And the battle was fierce that day, and Abner and the men of Israel were smitten before the servants of David. And there were 3 sons of Zeruiah there, Joab and Abishai and Ashael. And Ashael was light on his feet, as one of the gazelles in the field. And Ashael pursued Abner, and in going, he did not turn aside to the right or to the left from following Abner. So he's chasing Abner down. And Abner looked behind him and said, "Are you Ashael?" And he answered, "I am." And Abner said to him, "Turn aside to your right hand or your left, and lay hold of one of the young men and take his armor for yourself." But Ashael would not turn aside from following him. And Abner again said to Ashael, "Turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then could I face your brother Joab?" So you see, these people were enmeshed too. And so Abner is being pursued by Ashael on the battlefield. And he's like, "Hey, you want to make a name for yourself? Kill one of these other guys." He's like, "Nah, I'm good. I'm coming for you." And he's like, "If you don't turn aside, I'm going to have to kill you. And how am I supposed to face your brothers when I kill you?" Because they know each other. They were enmeshed. Civil war kind of stuff here. What does Yeshua say? He that will not forsake his mother and brother to follow me. That's what's going on here. Because of this 2-house split between Israel and Judah. But he refused to turn aside, and Abner struck him with the blunt end of the spear in the stomach. Like, you hear that, and it's like, okay, so he gave him the wooden end of the spear in the stomach to keep him from chasing him. So that the spear came out of his back. He hit him too hard, ran him through. And he fell down there and died on the spot. And it came to be that as many came to the place where Ashael fell down and died, they stood still. And Joab and Abishai pursued Abner, Ashael's brothers. And the sun was going down. Yeah, they ran up, saw the horror that was this guy run through backwards with the spear, and they stood still there. Kind of like a damn moment. And so the brothers pursued the exact thing that Abner was concerned about. And Joab and Abishai pursued Abner, and the sun was going down, and they came to the hill of Ammah, which overlooks Giah by the way of the wilderness of Gibeon. It just occurs to me that here we have different sects of the children of Judaism, SECTS, sects of the children of Israel, fighting because they can't agree. We have that today as well, and it's stupid. Fighting because they can't agree. Who to follow? What doctrines? What covenants? What laws? Fighting over which man to follow. You should do a quick Google search. Now, granted, it's garbage, but it's eye-opening as well, on who founded Mormonism, on who founded the Baptists, on who founded Lutheran, Episcopalian, Pentecostal, non-denominational evangelical, Messianic Judaism. Now you put Catholicism in there, it comes up as Jesus Christ founded Catholicism. I would disagree, because you shall know them by their fruits. And Jesus was not a wizard. I have a lot of issues with the Catholic Church, which is why I said that Google search will be garbage, but it will also be eye-opening. All of these movements, these particular ways of believing, are founded by men. Or you could just read the Bible and do what it says. And so Israel, the Father's chosen people, Genesis 32, which we're grafted into, likes to fight over which man they're going to follow, instead of realizing that that's not the most important part. You follow the Father. You follow the Father, and then you don't have to worry about which man you're following. But that's a whole nother talking point. And the children of Benjamin, gathered together behind Abner and became a single company and took their stand atop a hill. And Abner called to Joab and said, "Should the sword devour forever? Do you not know that it is bitter in the latter end? And what are you going to say to the people to turn back from pursuing their brothers?" And Joab said, "As Elohim lives, if you had not spoken, all the people would have given up pursuing their brothers only the next morning. If you'd kept your mouth shut, we would have stopped tomorrow morning." Joab then blew the shofar, and all the people halted and pursued Israel no further, nor did they fight any more. And Abner and his men went on all that night through the desert plain and passed over the Jordan and through all of Bithron, and they came to Machanaim. And Joab turned back from pursuing Abner. And when he had gathered all the people together, there were missing of David's servants 19 men and Ashael. So 20 of their guys are dead. But the servants of David had stricken of Benjamin and Abner's men 360 men who died. And they brought Ashael and buried him in his father's burial site, which was in Bethlehem. And Joab and his men went all night, and they came to Hebron at daybreak. We're going to pause there for now. We'll pick up in 3 next week. You know, when you're worried about which man you're going to follow, it does kind of matter. Is the king bisexual? It matters, I think. When you're following Yah's laws and not men, it don't matter at all. It's just a talking point. Israel is too good at breaking their ankles in the rabbit holes created by the men that they're following. And I believe that we are called to a higher ordeal than that. 1 Peter 2:21, to walk as Messiah walked. Worry less about the worldly and be more concerned with the eternal. Bless y'all. Shalom.